Now I know you're all probably getting a little hungry for lunch, but we saved the best speaker for last. Donna Harris is the Managing Director of Startup Regions for the Startup America Partnership. Having founded or been on the senior leadership team of 4 separate companies, Donna is focused on accelerating the formation of strong regional entrepreneurial ecosystems that can foster more successful startups and accelerate the trajectory of their growth. Under Donna's leadership, the Startup America Partnership is helping to foster vibrant entrepreneurial communities all over the country, including in a couple of the cities you mentioned, Andrew. Driven from within the community led by entrepreneurs themselves, these startup regions are locally owned and inclusive initiatives. I'm particularly excited to introduce Donna, as she is an entrepreneur in residence here at Georgetown. Thank you.
Great, thank you. So, can you hear me all right? So it's an interesting act to follow, some excellent data, which I think has laid really the foundation for why I wanted to come and talk with you about Startup America today. But I would be remiss if I didn't start with this. Everybody knows what that's all about, right? Are we here? Are we represented? All right, great. So the reason I brought this is not to give props to my alma mater, although that's a nice side benefit. The reason I brought this is that when we think about universities, I know I think about competition in terms of sports, avid football fan. Competition is a really important element when it comes to the sports field. Unfortunately, competition has also been a pretty important element in our culture, both in terms of how we approach economic development, how we approach our ecosystems and our communities. So I'm going to talk a little bit about what Startup America is up to in our regional initiatives, and most importantly, what does that mean for you all and your departments within your universities. So Startup America, for those of you who are not familiar with us, we're about 1.5 years old. We were launched out of the White House last January. We're graciously supported by the Case and Kaufman Foundations, and really, Jonathan laid the table very well, which is when we look at where all the net new job growth in our country has come from, it is that young, less than 5 years old, high growth company that really needs to be nurtured. But when we look across our country and we think about how are we doing that? How are we babysitting those companies and making sure that we're maximizing their potential for success? We're doing it in what we looked at as sort of a scattershot approach. There are some fantastic programs. There are pockets of schools and universities and nonprofits and government agencies that are trying to approach the problem and really doing admirable jobs. But there's no cohesive strategy to do that. We haven't been recognizing entrepreneurs as, frankly, the job-creating heroes that they are in the country. So Startup America really set out to begin to tackle that. So over the last 1.5 years, what we've been focused on is, first and foremost, just becoming the national brand for recognizing entrepreneurs, high-growth startups, and the successes. Recognizing that they are building all over the country. The slides that Jonathan showed couldn't represent it more successfully. We've got literally amazing companies in places from Nashville to Louisville to Providence, Rhode Island, and everywhere across the country. The second thing that we've done is we realized that there are direct things that we in Washington, D.C. can do to help startups succeed. So we've been curating resources for them, including significant discounts on the things that they spend money on, just to sort of remove some of the hurdles that get in their way. So startups that register with Startup America can get access to amazing shipping discounts, free airfare, discounts on computers and software and other tools that they use to accelerate their growth. They also can get access to a regular learning series. So if you live in Kansas, you might not have access to an Eric Ries or a Brad Feld. You might want to learn from them, but you're certainly not going to get on a plane and travel to see them. Our learning series bring the experts to the startups so that literally the startups can learn about the best practices about building their companies. So we've been very focused on directly helping startups with those opportunities, as well as, frankly, opportunities just to get on the national stage. We've taken startups to the Super Bowl to launch at halftime. We took startups to the Kentucky Derby, where they were able to pitch on Millionaires Row. We've taken them to ring the opening bell of the New York Stock Exchange. We have 8 companies that we're able to launch at demo this week. And we're going to continue to look for ways to just bring startups from across the country onto the national stage. The Startup America Regions is a sort of entirely separate approach to how we support startups. And that is that in addition to supporting the individual trees, we have to build a strong root system. And there are disparities. If you're a startup in one city versus another, you get different levels of support and help and access to capital and access to talent and government support than you might in another community. And that creates a problem. And frankly, I'm really distressed after a year and a half of travel across the country, how many times I hear people tell their high growth potential, really smart entrepreneurs, like we have here today, go to Silicon Valley. That is unfortunate on a number of levels. A, if you just look at the data in terms of the number of startups we need to create, the number of entrepreneurs we need to see startups as a career path, Silicon Valley can't hold them all, so we have a logistical problem. But second of all, we're creating a mindset. We're reinforcing the stereotype that you can't do it where you are. But you can. I see it every day. I literally am on the road most weeks, all week, and I see it in every community. I've yet to go to a community where I haven't met dozens of amazing companies that can become America's next companies, next great companies, frankly. So we're focused on helping to mobilize the communities across the country around a shared philosophy, which is that entrepreneurs themselves, people like me, who are serial successful entrepreneurs, we need to give back. We need to play a leadership role in our communities to make them stronger. So we give them a platform to come together so that they're not just an individual sort of hanging out there by themselves saying, I want to make my community better, not really sure how to do it. So we provide a platform for them to come together through our Startup America regions. We have now, as of yesterday, 29 regions that are state level. We'll add our 30th on Monday. So we've literally, what we thought would be an interesting experiment where we might get teams of entrepreneurs in 5 to 10 states has literally turned into a national movement with a life of its own. These are volunteers. They are spending extraordinary amounts of their time to really sit down and almost view their community as a startup. What assets do we have? What challenges do we have? What are our big ideas? Let's stop thinking negatively about our community, and let's envision what could be. If we throw out all the rules and we're completely disruptive about how we think about our community, what could we do? And by the way, if we don't fear failure, we don't care if the programs work or not, let's just try to tackle the challenges in our community. There are some amazing things that have begun to come out of these initiatives. Here in our own backyard, our Startup DC team has launched something called K Street Capital. Why I think that's compelling is, A, on one level, they're bringing wealth out of the DC community that didn't even know startups existed in the greater DC community and are beginning to invest. But I also love that because they have created a model that I can share with the other communities across the country, because every community has wealth. So this model is an example that the other champions from across the country can implement. So the Startup America regions are first and foremost about mobilizing the entrepreneurs and encouraging them to step up and play a leadership role in their communities. Most of you live in communities where you have a Startup America region. It's on our site with a nice map, so you can quickly see if you have a region or not. So you'll hear and see these people starting to step up. The second thing is that the regions are all about connecting the various communities to each other. I talked about competition before. If you think about historical economic development principles, it really was about competing. It was about giving enough incentives to motivate a plant to relocate to our state, which pits states and cities against each other. If you listen to any of the speakers this morning, the theme that you heard them talk about is a shift from a hierarchical competitive economy to a networked collaborative economy. And what we're really espousing is that we should stop competing with each other, because in the world of entrepreneurship, we can all be successful. There is no cap on the number of students who can start businesses, who can build successful businesses. So why not share the best ideas? So if DC has found a way to get wealthy people investing in startups, I want to share that with the other 1,000 volunteers that have stepped up across the country so that they can quickly figure out, is that a problem we have? Is this a way we might want to solve it? Can we learn anything from them? Okay, great, let's download their playbook and let's execute. So we're increasing the cycle time for the very best, most promising ideas for ecosystem building to be replicated. So I have 47 seconds left to leave you with 4 thoughts about your role. And I know you hate that I'm standing between you and lunch, so I'll stick to 40. So the first is culture. You all are training up the young minds. They're the future leaders in your communities. Their ability to understand how today's economy works will make or break their ability to be leaders in their communities. Teaching them to operate in an economy that is networked and collaborative and open and to not fear failure, those are important principles regardless of which department you operate in. The second thing is your role. You are a hub in your communities. You heard about some of the challenges. I encourage you to really think disruptively about how can you play a role in your community and in your ecosystem. If you have a Startup America region team launched in your community, reach out and meet with them and just get to know them and find out what they're working on. Because guess what? One of the biggest challenges I hear from them, access to talent. They're very concerned about the pipeline of future talent, which gets to my third piece. You all have the pipeline. You control the pipeline. All of our future engineers and programmers and CEOs and business developers are being trained in your institutions. So you need to be helping those students see that there's an ecosystem outside your boundaries. When Jeff asked me to be an entrepreneur in residence, there was somebody that asked me, how many times a month can you come on campus to meet with students? And I said, how about the students come to me? Get them off campus and into the ecosystem. So just really encourage your students to get outside the walls of your community and engage. And then the last is just collaborate with each other, because you all have amazing best practices that really can be shared. And that's what the session this afternoon is all about, that we're co-sponsoring with Jonathan and his team. It's about meeting your neighbors, and it's about talking about what are realistic ways that we can all collaborate together. And our website is just www.s.co. I'll be here all afternoon, so if you've got questions about what Startup America is up to, happy to answer it, but thank you for having us.